Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jessica had always been one of those restless women. From a very young age, she carried within herself an ambition that seemed greater than anything the world could offer. She loved to dance, and it was never just a hobby for her. She turned it into a profession, teaching, performing, choreographing, but inside her, there was a persistent voice saying that it still wasn't enough, that she deserved more, that she needed more. During the first years of her relationship with Brian, it almost seemed like that feeling of dissatisfaction would remain hidden, dormant. They got married after 3 years together in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Brian was affectionate, fun, and always present. But over time, Jessica began to feel suffocated by the ordinary life they were leading. He was the type who believed that working, paying the bills, watching a movie at the end of the day, and being close to the person you love was enough to be happy. But for her, it felt increasingly tight, uncomfortable, too small for all her dreams. The conversations that used to be about plans, trips, and projects turned into arguments. Jessica talked about opening her own studio, launching an app, traveling, growing. And Brian, with his always calm demeanor, tried to convince her that they could do it gradually, at the right time, without pressure, without debt, without unnecessary risks. This irritated her. She wanted it yesterday, not 5 years from now. No matter how loving Brian was, little by little, that lack of ambition started to generate a kind of frustration that was hard to control. She spent hours imagining what life would be like if she had someone with more vision, more courage, more desire to grow by her side. Ironically, this comparison often came to her when she thought about her cousin Claire. Claire always had a life that seemed taken from a movie. The daughter of successful entrepreneurs, she had access to everything from a young age. Good schools, trips, cars, expensive clothes, opportunities. But it wasn't just that. Claire also had Austin by her side, a man who embodied everything Jessica considered essential for a successful life. Intelligent, confident, successful, and above all, someone who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. When Claire invited her to spend that weekend at the beach house, Jessica didn't think twice. She accepted right away. Brian stayed home, claiming he had too much work and preferred to rest. Deep down, Jessica even thought it was better that way. She needed that time just for herself, away from the routine, the demands, the problems, and especially away from the suffocating feeling of being stuck in the same place. When she arrived, Jessica realized that the environment reflected exactly the life she desired so much. Luxury cars in the garage, well-dressed people, conversations about business, investments, trips. All of it seemed to reinforce even more how out of place she felt in her own life. And it was in this setting that her eyes met Austin's in a different way. Until that moment, he was just the cousin's fiancé. Always polite, friendly, but until then, nothing more than that. But that day, something changed. Jessica noticed a lingering look, a different smile, a kindness that seemed to go beyond what would be normal between future relatives. They started talking about random topics, music, travel, work. And as they talked, Jessica noticed how different Austin was from Brian. Every sentence he spoke carried a confidence she had never seen in her boyfriend. He talked about business like it was second nature. He had projects, goals, bold plans, and above all, showed that he didn't accept living an average life. That stirred something inside her that she couldn't even explain. Minutes passed, and without realizing it, the two were completely absorbed in the conversation, as if the world around them had disappeared. Jessica found herself laughing at jokes that weren't even that funny, fixing her hair, crossing her legs, looking at him in a way she didn't even try to hide. And Austin, despite being engaged, seemed to respond to every signal she gave off. At the end of the afternoon, when everyone was gathered on the porch, Jessica noticed Austin looking at her from afar. It gave her butterflies, a strange mix of guilt, adrenaline, and desire. It was wrong, she knew it. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. She felt seen, desired, valued. Throughout the night, amid casual conversations, the looks repeated. And at one point when Claire stepped away to take a call, Austin approached and made a comment that seemed loaded with double meanings. He said something like, "You know, it's hard to understand how some people settle for so little in life," looking directly into her eyes. Jessica smiled, fully understanding what he meant. And from that moment on, what had started as an exchange of glances turned into a dangerous game. They began finding any excuse to be near each other. A trip to the kitchen, a walk to the beach, a more private conversation away from the other guests. Each moment was a risk, but also a spark that ignited something she no longer had the strength to control. When she returned home, Jessica lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Brian, next to her, slept peacefully, oblivious to everything. And as she looked at him, one question kept echoing in her mind without stopping: is this what I want for the rest of my life? And without realizing it, at that exact moment, Jessica had already crossed an invisible line. A line that, once crossed, has no return. Jessica came back from that weekend different. As much as she tried, she couldn't ignore what she was feeling. The conversations with Austin, the looks, that connection beyond any logic. It was as if, suddenly, she had seen how far her life was from everything she had dreamed of. And the more she thought about it, the more distant she became from Brian, who, in turn, continued with the same quiet routine, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. As the days went by, what started with looks and subtle messages quickly turned into something much more intense. Conversations that initially seemed harmless soon took a different turn. Jokes gained double meanings, compliments became more direct, and before they realized it, they were completely involved. Jessica couldn't think of anything else. Every time her phone vibrated, her heart raced, hoping it was Austin. And when he sent that direct message, "I want to see you today. Just the two of us. No excuses." She felt a mix of fear, anxiety, and desire. He didn't suggest coffee or dinner. He sent the location of a motel directly, as if it had been agreed upon for a long time, and she, simply accepted. When she arrived, Austin was already there. She parked, took a deep breath, looked at her reflection in the car mirror, and realized how nervous she was, but at the same time, filled with an excitement she never imagined feeling. She went up to the room, and as soon as she opened the door, he pulled her by the waist, as if all that pent-up desire from the last few weeks was overflowing in that instant. Without exchanging words, without hesitation. It was as if they wanted to make up for lost time, as if the entire world had stopped just for them. In that room, all that existed was desire, the forbidden, the risk, and the urge to live something that, deep down, both knew could destroy everything. And even knowing that, they didn't stop. While all this was happening, Brian continued his life normally, completely unaware of any signs of what was going on. Jessica came home as if nothing had happened, smiled, asked about his day, made plans, pretended interest in their conversations. And unbelievably, Brian suspected absolutely nothing. He continued believing he had a dedicated, faithful, committed wife, while in reality, she was living a parallel life, full of secrets, lies, and choices he could never imagine. And at the same time, she started seeing Brian with different eyes. Everything about him seemed duller, slower, less interesting. Their conversations were always about the same things: bills, groceries, work issues, the usual everyday life. Jessica, on the other hand, was obsessed with an idea: creating a dance app. A project that, if successful, could finally pull her out of that life. And obviously, turn everything she knew how to do into money, a lot of money. She even talked to Brian about it. He, as always, wanted to help and offered the little he had saved, but it wasn't even close to the amount needed. That's when she made a decision that, up to that point, seemed logical in her mind. She approached Austin. She flirted, complimented him, made sure to say how much she admired intelligent, daring, and visionary men. And in a way that seemed almost natural, she steered the conversation toward her project. She told him her plans, how revolutionary it could be, talked about the difficulties, the costs, and how hard it was to make it all happen. Austin listened, asked some questions, but deep down, she knew he had already made his decision before hearing all the details. And she was right. The next day, he made a generous transfer to her account, without hesitation, without contracts, without bureaucracy. He just looked into her eyes and said, "Consider this an investment, in you." Jessica was ecstatic. That feeling of being supported, valued, and most importantly, closer to the life she had always dreamed of. She felt that, finally, things were starting to make sense. But as the weeks went by, something changed. Austin, who had always been available, started to become more distant. Messages took longer to be answered. Meetings, which used to happen frequently, began to be cancelled. Always with some excuse: meetings, trips, commitments. And when they did meet, he was colder, more distant, as if he wanted to keep her close but without committing too much. Jessica noticed that he avoided any conversation involving the future. Every time she hinted at being together, at having something more serious, Austin would change the subject, divert the conversation, or crack a joke, as if it were not even a real possibility. Her anxiety started to spiral out of control. She spent hours looking at her phone, waiting for a message, a call, any sign that he was still as involved as before. And with each silence, she felt disposable, as if, after getting what he wanted, he was simply returning to his perfect life with Claire. When she managed to get a meeting with Austin, she realized that this encounter might be the last. Jessica, driven by desperation, grabbed Austin's arm, looked firmly into his eyes, and blurted out, almost without thinking, "I'm pregnant." She knew it was a lie, but at that moment, it seemed the only way not to lose him. As soon as he heard that, Austin widened his eyes and asked directly, "And are you sure this child is mine? What if it's Brian's?" Without hesitating, Jessica replied firmly, "Don't worry, Brian and I haven't been intimate for weeks." She said it dryly, directly, hoping it would change everything, that it would make Austin commit, give her a fixed place in his life. And for a few moments, it seemed like it would work. He was in shock, asked if she was sure, wanted to understand how it had happened. Jessica, trembling inside, held firmly to the lie. She made up a story, said she'd found out a few days ago, that she was trying to figure out how to handle it, and that she only told him because she thought he deserved to know. And from that point on, the game that had once seemed fun turned into a heavy web, difficult to sustain, made of lies, insecurities, and choices that were starting to completely spin out of control. In the following days, Austin acted differently. He sent messages, asked how she was feeling, if she needed anything, but it was clear it wasn't exactly excitement. It was more responsibility, maybe fear, maybe pressure. Jessica felt that he was there, but only halfway. To keep this story alive, she had to try harder. She invented nausea, dizziness, said she was sleeping poorly, that she was sensitive. She created situations to justify any mood swings, any unavailability, any postponed meetings. In some conversations, Austin suggested they go together for a checkup, to better understand the situation, run tests, see where things stood. But Jessica avoided that topic all the time. She made up excuses that the doctor had cancelled, that she wasn't feeling well, that she preferred to wait a bit longer to be sure everything was fine. It was one excuse after another. And as this charade advanced, the weight of the lie grew heavier and heavier. Meanwhile, Claire began to suspect. Austin was acting strange. He forgot appointments, was distracted during conversations, spent a lot of time on his phone. And unlike before, he was more distant, less affectionate, more absent. Claire wasn't stupid. She started observing behaviors, paying attention to schedules, absences, whispers on the phone. Until one day, when Austin left his laptop open on the table, she couldn't resist. When she opened it, Claire found archived conversations. Messages he thought he had deleted but were still stored in the history. She read each one of them, and every word felt like a stab. She saw how it all began, from the first flirts to the most intimate conversations, the declarations, the secret meetings. And beyond the messages, she found bank transfer receipts. She clearly saw the amount sent to Jessica, with a generic description, but in that context, it spoke louder than any text. Claire's blood boiled. She felt anger, disgust, sadness, and indignation that took over her entire body. But instead of confronting Austin, she did something much more calculated. She decided that before any confrontation, someone else deserved to know about it. She called Brian. Her voice was firm, direct, without beating around the bush. She said she needed to talk, that it was serious, and that he deserved to know the truth. They arranged to meet. And as soon as they sat face to face, Claire opened the laptop, turned to him, and without saying a word, showed him everything. The messages, the conversations, the screenshots, the transfers. Brian read in silence, went pale, motionless, as if the world had stopped. For a few minutes, no words were spoken. When he finished reading everything, Brian took a deep breath, looked at Claire, and simply said, "Thank you for telling me." He got up and left. He didn't ask anything else, didn't want details, didn't want to hear excuses from anyone. In his mind, it was already all clear. Jessica was at home when Brian arrived. As soon as he walked in, she noticed something was different. He didn't look her in the eye, didn't say a word. He went to the bedroom, grabbed some clothes, a backpack, documents, and left without explaining where he was going. And she, not understanding anything at that moment, asked several times what was happening. The only thing he replied, before slamming the door, was, "It's over. I only feel sorry for you." Panic hit. Jessica tried calling, sent messages, ran after him, but Brian didn't want to talk. And to make matters worse, that same day, Austin showed up too. But unlike before, he wasn't there for a secret meeting or to pretend affection. He was serious, visibly irritated. He said that Claire knew everything, that she had discovered the messages, the transfers, and most importantly, that she was suspicious of this pregnancy. Jessica, in a desperate attempt to hold on to that lie, said she was nauseous, that she wasn't feeling well, that she was trying to schedule an appointment, but the doctor wasn't available. Austin crossed his arms, stared at her for a few seconds, and responded harshly, "Then make that appointment, because tomorrow you're going to the doctor with me. And we're ending this story." Jessica froze. Her whole body trembled. She knew she was cornered. She tried to argue, said she was nervous, that it wasn't the best time, but Austin wouldn't budge. He said that either she went, or he would resolve it another way. The next day, Jessica tried everything to avoid it. She cried, claimed she wasn't feeling well, that she couldn't get out of bed. But Austin went to her house, practically forced her into the car, and drove to a clinic. During the ride, she was sweating cold, shaking, heart racing, imagining 1,000 ways to get out of the situation, but none seemed possible. When they arrived, the doctor asked for a few minutes alone with Jessica, asked some routine questions, and then performed a quick evaluation. And in less than 20 minutes, the truth came out. The doctor looked her in the eyes and said, objectively and directly, "You're not pregnant. And from what I'm seeing here, you never were." Jessica felt her whole body go cold. Her hands shook, her legs went limp, and the words simply disappeared from her mouth. When the doctor called Austin back into the room, he realized, just from the doctor's look, that he didn't even need to hear what she had to say. And when she confirmed, Austin stood silent for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and said, "I feel nothing but disgust for you." He stood up, slammed the door, and left. Jessica remained there, sitting, staring at the floor, lost, empty, without reaction, as everything she had tried to build, in the worst possible way, crumbled in front of her. Panic overwhelmed Jessica. Her hands trembled, her chest tightened, it felt like the air was escaping. She grabbed her phone and, almost without thinking, called Brian. After a few seconds, he answered. His voice was dry, cold, without a trace of affection. She tried to start, but he cut her off immediately, shutting down any attempt at conversation. Wait for my lawyer. We're getting officially divorced. Claire told me everything. She told me you might be pregnant with Austin's child. I only hope this baby will be happier, much happier than you deserve. Jessica took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and before he hung up, she blurted out, Brian. I'm not pregnant. I made it all up. It was a lie. I messed up. The silence on the other end was cutting. For a few seconds, she thought he wouldn't even respond, but the reply came, hard as a verdict, you're sick. Seriously, you need help. And without waiting for another word, he hung up. At that moment, Jessica realized she had lost everything. The marriage, the respect, the trust, any bond that still existed. She tried to hold back the tears, tried to convince herself she could start over, but reality hit harder than any pain. The money Austin had transferred was frozen, a result of the lawsuit Claire filed, alleging misappropriation and fraud. And without that money, the app, which was already behind schedule, simply died. She tried for months to rebuild. She sought partners, investors, tried to convince old colleagues to join the project, but the story had already spread. Her name had become synonymous with problems, lies, and drama. No one wanted to associate with her, no one wanted to risk having their name tied to hers. Doors that once seemed wide open were now shut in her face without ceremony. Bills began to pile up. Jessica sold clothes, furniture, tried to cut expenses, but everything seemed to fall apart faster and faster. She spent hours scrolling through social media feeds, looking at the lives of people she knew and wondering where, exactly, everything had started to go so wrong. And as much as she tried to convince herself it had been a mistake, deep down she knew every step, every decision, was made consciously, driven by ambition, desire, and selfishness. But the hardest blow was still to come. A few weeks later, while scrolling through her phone, she came across a photo that made her heart race. It was Claire and Austin. They had gotten married. Officially. And as if the universe insisted on rubbing it in her face, the caption said it all, love conquers any storm. And now, we are 3. We can't wait to meet our baby. Jessica froze. Her gaze fixed on that screen, unable to blink, unable to breathe. Claire was pregnant. For real. That was the child she had tried to fabricate. A child that now not only united Austin and Claire but also sealed, once and for all, the end of any chance she had of returning to the life she had envied so much. She understood, in the cruelest way possible, that whoever builds their life on lies sooner or later watches it all collapse. And when it collapses, absolutely nothing remains. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.